Last month, I went on a mission to try and find the biggest and best upcoming cozy games that no one seems to be talking about. But to do this, I needed to hop on a plane and go to Germany, as this is home to one of the biggest gaming conventions in the world called Gamescom. And if you've never heard of Gamescom before, then this is Gamescom. Now, this event is 5 days long, and you need the whole 5 days to get around it all because it is absolutely massive. And although this is home to some of the biggest names in gaming with some absolutely outrageous stands, the place I enjoy the most is actually the indie game section, as there is nowhere else in the world where you'll be able to play this many indie games in one spot. And this year the emphasis was most definitely on cozy. But the best part by far of Gamescom is not just the ability to see some upcoming cozy games, but to be among some of the first people to ever get to play them. So today we're going to go through my standout cozy games that you'll definitely want to add to your wish list. Oh, and just a little PSA, a lot of the games which are coming out in 2025 and beyond will not be saying if they're coming to the Nintendo Switch until they know when the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be coming out. So if you don't see the word Nintendo Switch on some of these, don't be discouraged, they're just playing smart. First up, we have Floatopia. Now, this trailer caught a lot of attention when it first came out, rightly so, because it is absolutely gorgeous. But I was lucky enough to be able to play around 30 minutes or so of the actual game, so hopefully I can share a little bit more with you that you can't tell from the trailers. This is an absolutely gorgeous life sim that gives Animal Crossing vibes, but also brings with it its very own spin. As in this, you can decorate your dream home, fish, farm, forage, and of course, befriend the neighbors. But there's also a story that goes alongside of it as well. Because in Floatopia, it's not just the world that's magical. You actually are as well, with each person possessing their very own and unique superpower. The issue is that not everyone's superpower is deemed useful, and it's up to you and your crew of fellow overlooked superpowered people to set out to redefine the meaning of what it is to be useful and prove that every single power has hidden potential. And some of the superpowers are absolutely outrageous. Like we have Kiwi, whose superpower is to perfectly fit any item into a perfectly sized bag. We also have Pandy, whose superpower is to eat without feeling full. And then we have Joy, who, as someone with chronic fatigue, I feel personally attacked by, as her superpower is that she doesn't need to sleep, but she will be tired constantly. Now, the thing I really did fall in love with in Floatopia is just the world and the aesthetics. As on this journey, not only will you be able to uncover the truth, but you'll also be able to explore the world. And although I only got to see just this one island, they did say the game was going to be filled with ancient towns, mountain tops, fairy tale kingdoms, and so much more. And if each of the areas are as pretty as the one I got to explore, then we're in for a good time. And I really did enjoy the fact that you could essentially fly wherever you wanted to go to explore and gather resources so you could craft and make your house beautiful. Now, although this was a lot of fun to play with the half an hour I got, this most definitely is not a finished game, with the controls feeling a little bit clunky at certain points and the dialogue in some of the sentences not really being polished. However, this was the first ever playable demo, and the game isn't set to release until 2025, so I'm sure all of these things will be fixed for the final release. And this might finally be the game that fills the Animal Crossing sized hole in my heart that's yet to be filled by a single game. Do note though, this does look to be a free-to-play game, so it depends how they implement the free-to-play mechanics as to whether this is something I can really see myself spending a lot of time in. But so far, this holds a lot of promise. Oh, and by the way, this is set to come to the Nintendo Switch on launch. But I will say, I'm not convinced these graphics are going to translate to the Nintendo Switch's version. Next up, we have 30 Birds, which is coming to Steam and Nintendo Switch sometime in late 2024. And this is truly such a unique take on a narrative puzzle game. as the entire story takes place on the surface of a rotating lantern that you're free to explore. In this you play as Zig, a detective on the hunt for an international criminal known as the Scientist. But right when Zig feels like they're getting close to finding out who the Scientist is, the city's goddess is kidnapped. And all that's left is the Scientist calling card in the sky. So it then becomes your job to try and save her in time, all the while solving puzzles and befriending those you meet along the way. I absolutely adored the art style and how it's inspired by not only Persian art, but also the mythology as well. And by far my favourite part of running around is getting to the corners of the lantern and seeing everything switch over, or entering into different buildings and seeing what would happen there. And I love the fact that you learn so much of the story just through your conversations and investigations with different people. Now at Gamescom, I was lucky enough to be able to play the Nintendo Switch version of 30 Birds, and thankfully this looks and plays just as good as it does on the PC as well. So when this releases, I think this is going to be a fantastic cozy game. Next up we have Cairn. Now this won the Best Indie Game Award at Gamescom when it was up against hundreds of other indie games, and I can say this was absolutely incredible. And although this may not be conventionally cozy, this stood out to me so much and I wanted to share it because it's all about how you play it. Cairn is a survival climbing game, but don't be scared away by the word survival, as although the mountains can be unforgiving, the gameplay was weirdly calming. In this, it's up to you to study each of the rocks you need to climb and guide the placement of each limb methodically one by one in order to climb it. And although at first I was a bit iffy on if this was something I'd even enjoy, the controls were actually so unbelievably intuitive that I wound up having a blast playing it. Now it's safe to say I know absolutely nothing when it comes to rock climbing. But thanks to the in-game tutorial and also a bit of trial and error, it doesn't take you long to realise what makes a good hold and what makes a bad hold. And you'll know very quickly if you picked a bad spot to grab onto, because your character will get tired very quickly. And this is where the more survival aspects come into the game, as it will be up to you to try and find a better hold quickly before she gets too tired to hold onto the wall. And I honestly found this really fun to try and master, and some of the locations that you get to climb are absolutely beautiful. And although this isn't necessarily the type of game I'd instinctively pick for myself, I had an absolute blast playing it, and I think it's going to be an absolutely incredible game when it releases. Next up we have Infinity Nikki. Now, I was a little bit worried when I got into Gamescom that I might not be able to find the Infinity Nikki stand, but it turns out that wasn't really an issue at all, as they had this absolutely massive space dedicated to just playing and experiencing the game. Now, this is such an interesting game for so many reasons. So the Nikki franchise itself is actually absolutely massive, and they've had 3 previous titles all released on mobile that are essentially just dress up games, but they do what they do very well, and each of these games has an insane amount of absolutely wild lore that I don't think I could even begin to explain. And Infinity Nikki is the next game in the franchise, but it is massively shaking things up, because although there is a big dress up element to it, this is a lot less typical mobile games vibes and more Breath of the Wildy, as this is an open world adventure. And even though at first this looked like it was going to be a PlayStation and PC exclusive game, they have also announced that it's going to be coming to mobile as well. Now, the beginning of the demo starts off with the opening cutscene, and one thing that took me by surprise was the fact that the cutscenes were fully animated and also voice acted as well. And at first I was a little bit worried that this game was going to rely too much on the dress up mechanics and not really have much of a story, but thankfully I was proven to be very wrong. And the story will see you being picked as the chosen one to save this mysterious world, after a dress hanging in your closet drags you into a brand new realm. But in order for you to save this world, you first need to find all of the miracle outfits to restore it to its full potential and rid the world of evil. But not only are the outfits absolutely stunning, they also have a purpose, as each of the outfits you switch between has their very own power. Like for example, one outfit will allow you to float and another outfit will allow you to shrink, making them incredibly useful when you explore and even in combat. And on top of doing the storyline, you can also explore this brand new world as well, filled with plenty of secrets and dungeons for you to take on. And I never thought I'd see a game that includes puzzle elements, exploration, combat, and a gripping story, all the while also having dress-up elements as well. Now, one thing to bear in mind, this will be, I think, a free-to-play game. So obviously, the way in which they implement the free-to-play mechanics will have a big impact on how much I enjoy it, but I just really enjoy the idea that there's a cozy game with a really incredible story along with it. Next, onto a very different cozy game, and this is Woodo. Now, this featured in a Wholesome Direct a couple of years ago, but I finally got a hands-on chance to give it a go. And this is a 3D puzzle matching game that's not only absolutely gorgeous, but also tells the story of Foxy, who one summer decided to move from the big city to the countryside on a journey of self-discovery. And this to me is everything you look for in a cozy game, as this will see you match the items in the inventory to the empty spaces on the wooden structure in front of you. And bit by bit, you get to build up these different dioramas. And in Woodo, the joy is in its beauty and its simplicity. It was one of those demos that I struggled to put down as it was just so mesmerizing, even when I was playing it in a packed gaming convention. Again, we don't have a release date yet, but this game holds a whole lot of promise. Next up, we have the Berlin Appartment. Now, this was a very special demo to me, and out of all of the demos I tried over the 5 days that I was at Gamescom, this was the one that really stuck with me, as its themes and storytelling is just something else. The story follows a man refurbishing an old apartment in Berlin, and through the course of his work, he digs deeper and deeper into the history of those who lived in the apartment before him. And through each new relic you find, you get to live a part of the history of those who lived here over the last 100 years. Now, the game itself is done in an interesting way, as it's split into different episodes, each of which with their own protagonists, their own genre, and their own vibe. But all of these stories happen within the same four walls, in a city that has experienced so much in the last 100 years. There's only been a handful of cozy games that have managed to make me cry, but this one, I think, will most definitely make the list. It was something special when I got to play the demo, and I can't wait to see the final game. Next up, we have Momento. And if you're a lover of unpacking, then this is a game you will want to wishlist immediately, as this has similar vibes to unpacking, but instead of the items you unpack telling a story, here the items you choose to decorate with define the person's future. As in Momento, the items you decide to keep by finding room for them in each of the rooms you decorate, and the ones you ultimately decide to throw away, will define which narrative path the game sets you off on. And with stories of love, heartbreak, wonder and loss, you'll never know what the impact of your decorating could truly be until you've done it. But this is a cozy game we're talking about, so there is no wrong answers. Now, one thing that really surprised me when I got to play the demo for myself is how interactive all of the items were. As not only were you able to touch some of the items, like for example to turn lights on, but also some items could be stored inside other items, and you could even stack items as well. I also love that you can control everything up to the placement of the windows, and you even get to see the light stream through them in the daytime, or if you change it to nighttime, you get to see the moon come through instead. And there's even an entire tab dedicated to plants, including vines which you can place up the walls as well. And this just has everything I was looking for since I finished unpacking. And I love the idea that this has so much replay value to it as well, with different endings and different narrative paths that you can find by decorating a little bit differently. Next up is Map. Now, as many of you know, I am directionally challenged. However, I actually had an absolute blast playing what is essentially a cozy treasure hunting game. as this puts you in the shoes of a cartographer, set with the challenge to try and explore each of the islands and mark all of the relevant locations. And you're armed with nothing but an empty map, a compass, and the ability to count your steps, making this essentially an exploration puzzle game. And even though I thought I'd completely suck at this style of game, it actually does a really good job of easing you into it and teaching you everything you need to know. And I wound up doing not too bad a job. And even though this doesn't have a release date as of yet, hopefully we'll hear more about it soon. Next up is Grimoire Groves. I've had my eye on this game for a while, ever since it was announced, and I'm so glad that it's officially coming to the Nintendo Switch as well. As this is a magical, cozy dungeon crawler, which is not a genre we get to see a lot of. Now, the game starts you off having just moved into a forest called Grimoire Groves, which according to legend should have been home to all sorts of magical creatures and plants, making it the perfect place for witches to move to. The only issue is that when they get there, they find that there's only a few plants and a few creatures, and not a single forest spirit to be seen. So something isn't quite right. And it becomes the witches' jobs to investigate and try to restore the forest. This is honestly such a charming game, and I love the way it lets you test out and use so many different spells and magical spirits to help you out. But my favourite part by far is your ability to grow magical creatures. Sadly, we don't have a release date yet, but considering this is described as being a mix of Hades and Animal Crossing, two of my all-time favourite games, I'm sure I'm gonna love it. Then we have Lagoon. Now this game really caught my eye as it was described as being a cozy gamer's take on Wind Waker, only with a plane instead of a boat, as this will see you set off to the island of Limbo Archipelago in search of your missing uncle. The only issue is, after his disappearance, you were also left to take charge of his seaplane delivery service. So not only do you have a mystery to solve, you're now a small business owner as well. And this will see you collect resources to help craft goods to deliver to your customers, allowing you to then use the money to upgrade your plane and expand your business further. All the while, you listen out for any information you can on what might have happened to your uncle. The flying in this is so much fun, even though I was really trash at it. And if you fly around enough, you never know when you're going to find some surprise time trial-y bits as well, kind of giving me Spyro vibes. But one thing I really like playing the demo is the Slime Rancher approach to collecting resources, as you're basically just armed with a vacuum that sucks up anything in your path, meaning that you don't really have to worry about individually picking things up off the beach one by one, and you can mass collect resources instead. I love that cozy games are expanding in so many different ways, and I was so excited to give this one a go. The final game on today's list is Projected Dreams, and this is another fun twist on a puzzle game, as this is essentially a jigsaw puzzle as you try and match the shadow on the wall to the shape given to you. And in order to make the shadows, you can use any of the items and the toys in the room with you, where you can stack and rotate them however you see fit to try and make the correct shape. And although the first levels are pretty easy, it definitely does ramp up in difficulty, especially if you want to achieve a 3-star rating on each of the levels. The wonderful thing about Projected Dreams though is the fact that there's a story to go alongside the puzzles as well. As with each shadow you complete, you get to uncover a story all about a heartwarming summer, the importance of friendship, and bittersweet goodbyes. One thing I really liked about the demo is the fact that even with the controller, it was so easy to pick each of the different objects and rotate them and place them. I was also surprised by just how creative you could be with each of the shadows, as each level will unlock more items that you can use and more difficult shapes for you to try and make. And to me, this seems like the perfect game to play right before you go to bed. Those are some of the best cozy games that I found at Gamescom. Let me know if you want to see a part 2 in the comments down below, because I definitely played enough games to make one. And if you want to see my opinions on the brand new Legend of Zelda game, click this video here.